Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our new show this week in Israel, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed. The Taylor Force Act has just cleared a major hurdle, and it's on its way to becoming U.S. law. The bill proposes severely cutting U.S. aid to the Palestinian Authority unless the PA stops paying salaries and stipends to terrorists and their families. The legislation, which the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee has unanimously approved, also enjoys broad approval from both Democrats and Republicans in Congress. The PLO, on the other hand, has consistently slammed this law and says that it violates Palestinians' human rights, but the act actually includes exceptions and allows American money to continue funding Palestinian water and children's vaccination programs, among other things. The Taylor Force Act also cleared the Senate committee vote with flying colors earlier this year, which means it's likely to end up on President Trump's desk to be signed into law once it's up for a full congressional vote. Meanwhile, the House committee has also just passed fresh new sanctions against the internationally recognized terrorist organization in Gaza, Hamas. The Hamas Human Shield Prevention Act specifically bars groups, governments, or individuals from funneling money to Hamas. And there's also the Palestinian International Terrorism Support Prevention Act, which places the same ban on anyone funding Palestinian terror. All three bills are now heading to the rest of Congress for the final and decisive vote.
A new Iranian military base has just been confirmed in Syria, roughly 40 miles from Israel's northern border. Satellite images acquired by the BBC from Western intelligence agencies have revealed at least 3 confirmed structures, with more well on the way. All concrete proof of Iran's commitment to establish permanent strongholds throughout the region. This isn't the first Iranian military site discovered in Syria, of course, and most agree that it certainly won't be the last. Israel has detected and possibly even targeted several Iranian strongholds in Syria over the last year, including what's believed to have been a chemical weapons plant and rocket storage facility for both Iran and Hezbollah. As if tensions on the border weren't bad enough, IDF missiles also just shot down an unmanned Syrian drone that attempted to breach Israeli airspace. Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman reasserted Israel's position that it would always fire back when fired upon, promising that, quote, "The Syrian regime is responsible for every attack and violation of our sovereignty, and we will not allow the Shiite axis to be established in Syria as a base for action," end quote.
Russia and the United States have closed an agreement for a ceasefire zone in Syria, but Israel is outraged because the deal apparently allows Iranian troops within as little as 3 miles from Israel's northern border. A U.S. security delegation has arrived in Israel to discuss the problem, but Russia has just announced that Iran's presence in Syria is perfectly legitimate. Take a look.
Так вот, в контексте конкретных решений о том, как эта зона будет функционировать и как сделать так, чтобы там не было рецидивов столкновений, там действительно записано, что как внутри этой зоны, так и с внешней стороны надо стремиться к тому, чтобы оттуда выходили не сирийские вооруженные формирования. Ни о каком Иране, а тем более проиранских силах речи не шло. Если говорить о проиранских силах, то, наверное, у кого-то возникло искушение назвать чуть ли не всю сирийскую армию проиранской. И надо что, капитулировать? Это, по-моему, выдавать желаемое за действительное.
Russia's stance on the matter is a truly disturbing one for Israel. It defines Iran's presence within missile range of Israeli territory as legitimate and backs away from any promises of removing Iran from the border. Top security officials from the U.S. have just arrived to discuss the matter face-to-face with Israel, but with a ceasefire deal already signed, many despair that it's already much too late. This is exactly the situation Prime Minister Netanyahu has spent months trying to prevent, and it's exactly why he announced that Israel wouldn't be bound by any deal that harmed the country.
And we must all work together to stop Iran's aggression, its worldwide campaign of terror, and its pursuit of nuclear weapons. I think if we stand together, we're going to achieve it. But I've always said, If we have to, we'll stand alone. Iran will not get nuclear weapons. It will not turn Syria into a military base against Israel.
Well, things are ramping up between Israel and the Islamic Jihad terror group in Gaza. We're seeing intense back and forth threats between both sides, and now the Israeli army has just deployed the Iron Dome defense system over the city of Tel Aviv. By taking such extreme precautions, the army clearly sees a very real possibility of violence from Islamic Jihad on the horizon. Tensions first became heated a few weeks ago when the IDF destroyed a terror tunnel in Gaza that breached Israeli soil. 14 members of Gaza's Islamic Jihad group were killed in the blast, and threats of retaliation have been escalating ever since. Rumor has it that both Hamas and the Palestinian Authority have been pressuring Islamic Jihad to back off from any attack, since an armed conflict with Israel would almost definitely derail the ongoing Palestinian unity talks. It looks like Egypt has a stake in this as well. We're hearing that top Egyptian officials are also strongly urging Islamic Jihad not to engage with Israel. Now, Islamic Jihad is primarily funded by Iran, but given Egypt's much higher level of influence in the Strip, they are likely to listen to what Egypt has to say, at least for a little while. Having said that, it's clear that the army still isn't taking any chances.
While tensions between Israel and Syria are nothing new, the surprising situation between Lebanon and Saudi Arabia is threatening to explode into an all-out war. About a week after Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri resigned, accusing Hezbollah and Iran of seizing control of his parliament, the Saudi government is suddenly ordering all Saudi citizens to get out of Lebanon immediately. These are the kinds of words you typically hear before war is declared, a proclamation that, according to Hezbollah, the Saudis have already made. But Iran is actually seen as the major player behind the scenes of this conflict as well. Saudi Arabia and Iran are fierce enemies, and Iran's relationship with Hezbollah in Lebanon has been skyrocketing in recent years. If a war were to break out, it would almost certainly be Iran's proxy war against the Saudi empire. But one major factor in all of this still remains unclear: the true nature of Hariri's resignation from the Lebanese government. The Prime Minister made his announcement while abroad in Saudi Arabia, which at first was seen as a move of desperation to survive possible assassination at the hands of Hezbollah. But now the Lebanese government is claiming Hariri is actually being held captive in Saudi Arabia, and that his resignation was made under duress. This is a mystery that will definitely need to be cleared up soon, especially if the world hopes to escape another horrific Middle East war.
This is a matter of great concern to us. And what we want is for peace to be preserved in Lebanon. It is essential that no new conflict erupts in the region. It could have devastating consequences.
All right, rescuers are still sorting through the rubble after the horrific earthquake that rocked Iran and Iraq. The death toll has just hit 530 victims. But even though Iran and Iraq are two of Israel's most fierce enemies, Israel has just offered to lend them a hand by providing critical medical aid and rescue teams on the ground. Prime Minister Netanyahu has revealed he made the offer to lend Israeli support to the disaster-stricken countries through the Red Cross, after seeing the heartbreaking images of men and women and children buried under the rubble. Perhaps less surprising, however, is that both Iran and Iraq almost immediately turned down Israel's offer. Netanyahu had said that Israel's real quarrel is not with the people of Iran, but rather with its oppressive regime, and this rejection certainly adds fuel to that fire. But to end this on a more hopeful note, it turns out that where politicians stumble, two women may be leading Middle East peace. A photo from the Miss Universe beauty pageant featuring Miss Iraq smiling and posing with Miss Israel has just gone viral. In a stirring and rare demonstration of coexistence, Miss Israel contestant Adel Gandelsman writes, "Get to know, this is Miss Iraq and she's amazing. Practicing bringing world peace. You go, girls."
All right, now making good on its warning just a few days ago against acts of terrorism, the Israeli army has just arrested a top commander of the West Bank's Islamic Jihad terror group. The Shin Bet has confirmed that Tariq Ka'adan, who runs the group's terror activities in the West Bank, is now in custody along with 13 additional Palestinian suspects. Less than 48 hours ago, the IDF's Major General issued a stern video warning to the Islamic Jihad group that Israel was aware of their plans to carry out an attack, and that Israel was ready to respond. Tensions have been on the rise ever since Israel destroyed a Gaza terror tunnel that breached Israeli territory, killing 14 members of the Islamic Jihad in Gaza. The group was apparently warned against retaliation by the Palestinians, since an armed conflict with Israel would almost certainly derail the ongoing Palestinian unity talks. Israel has a vested interest in those talks proceeding uninterrupted as well, which is why the army warned Islamic Jihad against inciting violence and even went so far as to arrest one of the group's top leaders at the height of these tensions. And just a day before the arrest, Prime Minister Netanyahu had even warned specifically, quote, "We will take a very strong hand against anyone who tries to attack us or attacks us from any sector," end quote.
A new decision from Israel's highest court authority is destined to become a controversial and landmark ruling. Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit has just announced that contrary to prior verdicts, Israel can confiscate privately owned Palestinian land for certain specific purposes in the settlements. This sets a massive precedent for the Israeli courts because the decision means the state can now legally justify what was once seen as illegal seizures of land owned by Palestinians. Now, the ruling doesn't apply to every single case. For now, it only specifically applies to the paving of new access roads into the Halsha settlement. For Israelis living in the settlements, these roads are critical because they allow safer, easier access to get to their homes. But critics are usually quick to point out that these roads are built on land that doesn't legally belong to the state of Israel and is actually owned by Palestinians. This ruling, of course, has huge implications on the Justice Department's future policy towards the construction of Israeli settlements and outposts throughout the West Bank. That's at the heart of Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked's statement on the ruling, which reads, "The Justice Minister welcomes this decision that constitutes another stage of implementation of the rights of hundreds of thousands of residents of Judea and Samaria." Clearly, certain politicians are hoping this ruling will carry over into all rulings on settlement affairs. Proponents of the Palestinians, however, are likely very worried that this may be the beginning of the end for any hopes of a two-state solution.
Now, the Red Cross provides humanitarian aid and money for disaster relief all over the world, but now they've pledged new money to a cause that's bound to ignite some controversy. We've just learned the Red Cross has signed a deal with the Palestinian Authority to help cover costs for families visiting Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with the latest on this. And Brett, this seems to me, at least, like an unusually political agenda for the Red Cross, isn't it?
Well, on the surface, sure. I mean, typically we associate the Red Cross with natural disaster relief and blood drives. So, yeah, it seems a little strange for them to be signing paperwork with the PA in what would some argue is a political issue. But what happened was, earlier this year, the Red Cross was overseeing negotiations between the PA and the most recent Palestinian prisoner hunger strike. And one of the biggest issues in that strike was that the prisoners wanted 2 monthly visits from their families instead of 1. But since the prisons are in Israel and their families are in the West Bank, the cost of these visits is not just expensive, but it's incredibly complicated.
All right, but what I want to understand is something that I think confuses a lot of people here as well, is it Israel's responsibility to make those visits available then, or is it totally up to the families? I mean, why is a third party like the Red Cross stepping in at all here?
Sure, well, I mean, it's definitely a complicated answer that's up for a lot of debate. But let me put it this way. So Israeli prisons and prisoners by law are open to scheduled visits from family members at a totally regular interval. But what makes this tricky is that the prisons themselves are located in Israel, while most of the prisoners' families are in the West Bank. And as we know, of course, movement in and out of the West Bank is a complicated and time-consuming affair for Palestinians, especially for many of these families who are related to heavily convicted terrorists. So that's just kind of how the Red Cross justifies stepping into a situation like this and why it's definitely going to ignite some controversy, as you'll see now in the report. Earlier this year, over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners convicted of terror against the State of Israel conducted a massive 40-day hunger strike. While some of their demands did include better conditions in their Israeli jails, it turns out that the biggest ultimatums of all were directed right at the Palestinian Authority to up the number of monthly family visits from 1 to 2. This was a promise that PA made to prisoners to end the strike earlier this year, a request that would cost about $6 million to pull off. Now the International Committee of the Red Cross has just agreed to help cover that figure and even provide additional training to PA personnel to oversee the visits. But the move is sure to incite intense controversy, considering some of these prisoners are serving back-to-back life sentences for heinous, brutal murders of Israeli citizens, making their families a personal security threat in Israel as well. Though Israeli prisons are bound by law to allow pre-scheduled visits, the difficult and often complicated permit process for Palestinians to leave the West Bank has deterred many in the past. In fact, the Red Cross actually decreased the visits from twice to once a month in the first place because families were unwilling to go twice. But needless to say, the Red Cross's money is certainly speaking volumes right now.
At least 60,000 Polish nationals just marched in Warsaw to celebrate 99 years since Poland's independence. But the fanfare is disturbing Jews all over the world because some of the rally cries called for all of the Jews to get out of Poland. Israel has condemned the anti-Semitic public protest, and ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with the details. Now, Brett, what exactly was seen on the ground there?
Well, this was a gathering of Poland's far-right factions, and a lot of them have heavy white nationalist roots. So there were banners with symbols of white supremacy, anti-Muslim slogans, chants against non-whites, and yes, all kinds of anti-Semitic rallies for a pure Jew-free Poland. Now, Israel's foreign ministry spokesman has obviously totally condemned this all, but although the Polish government, they agree anti-Semitism can't be tolerated, they're mostly dismissing Israel's criticism. Poland's foreign ministry is actually celebrating the march, saying it united, quote, differing views around Polish freedom, and that these anti-Semitic chants were merely incidental to the march.
And it's shocking. I saw this all over social media as well. I mean, people are really outraged, and we've seen the pictures and heard those chants. And certainly none of it seems incidental, as you said. But what makes this especially tough for Israelis, in your mind, to digest is that this is happening in Poland, of all places, a country that was hit maybe the hardest by the horrors of the Holocaust, right?
I totally agree. I mean, what makes these rallies for a Jew-free Poland even more baffling is that there are actually less than 10,000 Jews left in Poland right now. 90% of Poland's Jews were exterminated in the Holocaust, and a huge percentage of the survivors fled to Israel to help build the country after World War II. So to see right-wing rallies like this, and even for the government to kind of defend them in a way, says a lot about what's going on in Europe and the rest of the world right about now, as you'll see in the rest of my report.
These are just some of the rally cries chanted by thousands of Polish nationalists in the streets of Warsaw. 60,000 have gathered to celebrate the country's 99th Independence Day, but the turnout has ignited fears of a growing anti-Semitic culture spreading throughout Europe. Poland, of course, suffered some of the most horrific casualties of Hitler's final solution, with 90% of Poland's Jews being wiped out in the Holocaust. But other than a small group of counter-protesters nearby, you'd be hard-pressed to find a sympathetic shoulder to Jewish plight at this massive gathering. Poland's government has a controversial policy towards Holocaust history. Most recently, the country made it illegal to refer to extermination camps in Nazi-occupied Poland as, quote, Polish death camps. Identifying Auschwitz as Polish, for example, in any way could earn you up to 3 years in jail. As for the cries for a Jew-free Poland heard at this day's rally, merely incidental, to quote the Polish government.
Now, this is probably going to be the best news Israelis will hear all month. Israel's Minister of Justice has just announced that Israel and the United States are closing in on the mother of all deals, a visa exemption for any Israeli to enter the United States of America.
Now, let me just give this a little perspective. At the moment, if Israelis want to enter the United States, even as a tourist, they must first apply for a visa with the United States government for a sizable fee. Those people whose applications are considered, and unfortunately many are not even after they've been paid, must then interview with an official at the United States Embassy in Tel Aviv. For most Israelis, this is a stressful, scrutinous experience because they have to justify their reasons for visiting the U.S. While some Israelis do obtain all kinds of visas this way with no problem, countless others are denied entry to the U.S. every month. That's why Israelis are doing backflips over Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked's tweet announcing that Israel and the U.S. have found a way to get Israelis into the country visa-free. Her tweet reads, quote, "Since I took up my post, we've been working with the Americans on joining the select group of countries whose citizens are exempt from obtaining an entry visa to the U.S. We have found the balance between protecting the privacy of Israeli citizens and United States requirements," end quote.
All right, now this could be one of the biggest medical breakthroughs yet. A team of Israeli scientists have just found a way to regrow severed spines in rats, allowing paralyzed rodents to regain the ability to walk for the first time ever.
The research that pioneered this wonder comes from Israel's Technion Institute of Technology and Tel Aviv University. This is the first time any scientific team has found a way to regrow damaged or destroyed neurons, the cells that carry messages to the brain's command center and make motor function possible. The Israeli team was able to grow new nerve tissue from stem cells, which were then treated with a special growth factor and implanted into the places where the rat spines were completely severed. A severed spine means total paralysis below the neck, but after just a handful of weeks, nearly half of the rats in the trial suddenly started walking again for the first time. no training, and no rehab required. There's still a long road to go before this kind of treatment might be ready for humans, but clearly this is a major step forward for millions suffering from nerve damage of all kinds. Bet you never thought you'd be this excited to see a rat scurrying across the floor, right?
Just like the real-life Wonder Woman that she is, Israel's Hollywood superstar Gal Gadot is taking a stand against sexual assault, and she's putting her own career on the line to do it. ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh is here now with more details. Emmanuel?
Yes, we've learned that Gadot has just refused to sign on to star in Wonder Woman 2 unless Warner Brothers cuts all ties with one of the film's producers, who has been accused multiple times of sexual assault. She's taking a stand and showing girls all around the world what it means to stand up for what you believe in. I'll fill you in more in my report. Israeli beauty Gal Gadot skyrocketed to world fame as the star of this summer's biggest blockbuster, Wonder Woman, a film that broke records and redefined girl power both behind and in front of the camera. Needless to say, the sequel got a guaranteed green light. But now Gadot is using her Hollywood sway for a cause, and Hollywood insiders are saying she's refusing to sign on for Wonder Woman 2 until the studio removes producer Brett Ratner from the project. Ratner's Rat Pack company partially financed and produced the first Wonder Woman, but now that victim stories have emerged against Ratner, Gadot is standing behind her principles. Clearly, she believes that a movie about women's empowerment made by women shouldn't have any ties with a man suspected of horrendous sexual misconduct against them. I have to say, I'm extremely proud, not just because the Wonder Woman star is from the Holy Land, but because she's becoming a role model for young girls around the world, teaching them to stand up for what they believe in. So we've shown you a variety of different Israeli celebrities, from actors and actresses to high-tech geniuses. But now it's time for the latest top 5 Israeli musicians. At number 1, we have Asaf Avidan. Before the Reckoning song One Day Singer shot to international fame for his unique tone and lyrical talent, he started his career out in Jerusalem in a folk rock band called Asaf Avidan and the Mojos. Let's just say one day we hope to see him in concert. There's no denying that our second artists are the life of absolute every party, Statik and Ben El Tavoi. This is not the first nor the last time we'll be speaking about the duo who have taken over Israeli radios for the past couple of years, and recently became worldwide with their hit Tudo Bom, which means all good in Portuguese. Needless to say, they're absolute stars here in the Holy Land as well as in Brazil, and soon all over. Who can forget the relaxing new soul singer Yael Naim? The Israeli-French singer-songwriter rose to fame back in 2008 for her hit single New Soul. The song ended up being used by Apple for advertisements in MacBook Air campaigns, and the even peaked at number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. Idan Reichel is our 4th Israeli singer-songwriter on our list, best known for his Idan Reichel project, which creates the perfect fusion of electronics, traditional Hebrew text with a mix of Arab and Ethiopian music. When people say some are just born talented, they're referring to people like Idan Reichel. Last but definitely not least, the stunning and talented Esther Raza. The young musician began her career during her military service in the IDF, where she would sing Israeli pop songs for the IDF band. Post her EP release, Rada began to gain worldwide fame on her tours across Europe, the US, and Canada. She even performed at the Glastonbury Festival. She opened up for Alicia Keys here in the Holy Land, and even opened up for Sting on multiple occasions. Her music video, Life Happens, has more than 1 million views, so you guys better go check that out and make it 2 million. All right, well, make sure you all go download these top Israeli artists' songs ASAP. That's all for today's top 5. Back to you.
That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of This Week in Israel. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.